hospitals in the rural area Good evening. We're live right here from Jackson, Mississippi at We Believe Digital Podcast Studio. We try to broadcast at least 3 times a week on a noonday program called Newsbreak. Normally my host Chris Young is here with me, but he's up doing some wonderful things on the northeast part of our state as we celebrate this holiday. This holiday, Juneteenth, has been proclaimed a national holiday, and African Americans all over this country are singing and shouting and rejoicing in the fact that we have been recognized with a national holiday to celebrate our freedom from slavery. Now, as always, you can call in to this show at 800-492-5186. You can see us on YouTube TV, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and our own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. You know, it's our hopes that those of you in the western part of the world and the eastern part of the world will join in and help us celebrate this wonderful occasions. There are activities going on all over the state of Mississippi as we recognize the accomplishments and the achievements and the struggles that African Americans had to overcome in order to be here today. You know, it's no small task. And while we celebrate by song and dance and festivities and food, we also must celebrate by recognizing the tremendous debt that we owe to those that have paved the way for me to have an opportunity to come to you today throughout this entire country and talk to you about some of the things that we came through to get to this point. We shall never forget the ancestors and the price that they paid and the struggles that they endured, the hardships that they endured, just to be able to fight for a better life for their children. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the activities that are going on across the state of Mississippi, and I want to start out with activities that have just concluded over at the Medgar Evers Library at 4215 Medgar Evers Boulevard. And so fitting for us to have an event at the Medgar Evers Library, because we know, and those of you who don't know, I want to inform you that Medgar Evers was gunned down in his driveway because he was the field director for the NAACP. He gave his life in this struggle, trying to register blacks to vote and trying to create a movement where African Americans would be viewed as first-class citizens. He gave his life for that. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about the celebration of Juneteenth, and we're going to talk about the struggles, because this ought to be a day of remembrance. This ought to be a day of educating the youth on what has transpired so that they'll be connected to their history. Too often we're disconnected from our history, and it does not serve us well, because unless you know where you came from, you cannot predict where you're going, and you cannot circumvent repeating of things that were tremendously bad. And in this country today, with all of the brutality and the mass shootings that are occurring daily, It's important that we teach our children our history. It's important that we take a moment and sit down at the dinner table and talk about the individuals that gave the ultimate sacrifice. So as we celebrate this holiday, Juneteenth, and the reason we celebrated Juneteenth is because black folk in Texas primarily didn't know they were even free for 2 years. Back in 1865. They had no idea that blacks at Lincoln and the Emancipation had been given and that blacks were actually free because nobody wanted them to be free. And so the status quo remained for 2 more years. But just like Joseph Wells, nobody told him the war was over. So he kept fighting. And blacks in the South had to continue to fight for the rights even after the Emancipation Proclamation was given. And we continue to fight for those rights today, primarily because there's been a disconnect from our history. And so we have breakdowns, and we have allowed the clock to be turned back. We see things happening today that we would never have thought would have happened again after we broke through the terror of the Klan. And yet to have church shootings and school shootings and the scaling of the walls in Washington, D.C., we find that we're worse off than we were in the mid-'70s. And that race relations are the tension is at an all-time high. Code words are being applied today that we never even thought about 10 years ago. Code words like CRT, critical race theory, and the fact that you have governors, specifically the governor of the state of Mississippi and the legislature, said that CRT, critical race theory, will not be taught in Mississippi schools. It will not be taught in Mississippi schools because they want to forget their history. They, being whites, Europeans, want to forget the tremendous devastation and damage that was put upon African Americans for the sole purpose of trying to maintain white supremacy and a standard of living that slaves had afforded Europeans in this country. CRT. Now we hear code words like WRT, WRT, white replacement theory. And the white replacement theory probably is the greatest danger to our society that we've experienced in a long, long time, because it attempts to justify the behavior and the meanness and the cruelties that one group can put on another in order to sustain itself or sustain its perceived power and influence that they've enjoyed over the years. White replacement theory. What does it mean? It means that the browning of America is causing great concern. It means that our democracy and our way of living is under attack. You see, democracy, and even some say that America does not live under democracy, but that we are a republic. But you see, democracy doesn't work well if you're the minority. One vote for one man and woman doesn't work well when you are the minority. If you do not have the ability to elect whom you want to various offices, then democracy fails that group. And you find yourself in the same situation of those that were oppressed, that were brought into this country against their will, that have suffered and endured the greatest hardships of all. You find yourself in that position. And yes, I understand and I expect that you will fight like hell. You see, no one wants to be a permanent underclass, a member that is always mistreated, that the judicial systems don't work for, and that our law clerks and our legal institutions don't work for, and that our employment and housing conditions and the banking and institutions don't work well for the minority. And so we can expect some difficult days ahead. And we need leaders like we had in the past that got us to this point. So we can never forget the sacrifices of Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King and Vernon Damer and Stokely Carmichael, Angela Davis, Nat Brown. We can never forget the sacrifices that were made by these individuals that were trying to take us to a new place, a new standing in life. And yes, Martin Luther King tried harder than most. Martin gave his life trying to improve the quality of life for sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. And Malcolm X, the struggles, the brutal murder of Malcolm. All of these things are fresh on my mind as if it were yesterday. The brutal attack on Emmett Till. And as a 14-year-old boy, having observed what happened to Emmett in Mississippi, sent shock waves through African-American boys throughout this entire country. And we owe a debt of gratitude to Emmett's mother for opening that casket to show the world how ugly it was and is, how dangerous society can become. And that was just one incident that African-American males had to endure, watching hangings, watching their mothers and fathers being beat down, watching property being taken away, cattle just removed one night because someone decided that they no longer belong to you, cars taken out of driveways, trucks and sawmills taken away just because you could. And so we celebrate Juneteenth, but we will never forget how we got here. You see, as a 15-year-old boy, my father took me and put me and my sisters and brothers in the car, and we drove up the Natchez Trace. For those of you who don't know, the Natchez Trace was the trail that was used by the Natchez Indians from Nashville, Tennessee to Natchez, Mississippi. and a very scenic route today. But my father took me up to show me the greasy spots in the natural trace where two of my cousins had been run over the weekend and castrated. 15-year-old boy. That's our history. Those are the things that were commonplace, that ran rampant throughout this entire country. And yet we wonder why African Americans suffer today, why they need therapy, and why the damages of trauma just reign supreme. We're getting ready to go to a station break. You can call us at 800-492-5186. We'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned.
June 19, 1865 was the day Union soldiers enforced President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and freed all remaining slaves in Texas. We can use Juneteenth as a way to acknowledge our past faults, help heal current divisions, and move toward a future as a nation more united. We believes in Juneteenth.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. And singing the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Happy Juneteenth from the We Believe family.
Are you tired of living check to check and looking for residual income? We have just the opportunity for you. Join us on Saturday, the 25th of June in Jackson, Mississippi, as we discuss the sexiest industry in the world, travel. Let's turn your passion into profits, whether it's on a full-time or part-time basis. Please RSVP or text to 404-915-8626. We look forward to connecting and taking flight. See you soon.
And we're back. We're broadcasting live from Jackson, Mississippi. We're broadcasting from We Believe Broadcast Studio right here in Jackson, Mississippi, where we're going to tell the stories, recount the history. We're going to try and talk about the future, what has to be done to turn things around. We're going to bring solutions to problems. We're going to have guests on these podcast shows that are going to give us their life experience. We're going to deal with the issues of crime and poverty and things of that nature. And we deal with that when we have an audience that's willing to listen. And so the national celebration of the holiday of Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to get folk to listen. And that's why you have sponsors that are sponsoring events all across this state of Mississippi, saying that Juneteenth must be recognized as a national holiday. Guess great and equal to Independence Day for America, celebrated on July 4th. And the celebration is because we were able to break away from bondage, break away from all of the things that were keeping us down. African Americans did not break away. African Americans find themselves in worse shape today than they were in the mid-'80s. So something has gone terribly wrong. And there are no leaders. There are no drum majors. No one says that we're in a tremendous decline. There are no programs. It's not being discussed. Absolutely more dangerous than anything else is that there's been a disconnect from the history that I'm talking about from young African Americans that are now finding themselves in the role as the protector and the provider for the race. And if there's a disconnect, then we're in tremendous trouble. And so we're going to celebrate Juneteenth all across this country. And tonight at 7 p.m., the Juneteenth Junk Pot and Fireworks kicks off at the New Horizon Hill Complex on the dock. It's at 7 p.m. tonight. Well, we'll be watching fireworks from the convention center downtown because the hill is probably the highest point in Jackson, where you can see all over the city. Saturday from 8 to 12, we have Faith, Freedom, Finance, a financial literacy and empowerment access to capital workshop. Lord, we know we need access to capital. Because in the South, Mississippi, and in the black community, we have been redlined. Redline means that the financial institutions don't have a conscience, that they don't make loans in certain zip codes. If you don't have access to capital, it's impossible for you to be a successful business person. An entrepreneur without capital is like a car without fuel. You can't go anywhere. So from 8 to 12, we're going to have a financial literacy program. From 9 a.m. to 12:30, there's a wellness information experience. You see, black folk, we are under siege in many ways, more than you can recognize. You don't have the ability to see. That's why we suffer from diabetes and heart attacks, because of the poor health that we are in as a state. Obesity being the number one cause of most of our problems. And the fact that we don't work as hard as we used to. You see, when I came along as a boy, there were no obese people in the community that I came out of. It's because they worked like hell from 6 a.m. till dark, from dusk to dark. When you cutting pulpwood and hauling logs and baling hay and chopping cotton, you're robust, and you're thin, your muscle, your BMI is 15. You're strong. And that'll overcome the consumption of those pork chops and all these unhealthy foods that we were eating, because the body had a chance to sweat. The skin is the greatest source of relieving poison from the body through perspiration. And so our elders were lean and mean and hard. They worked hard. And they were healthy. But today, what do we have? We have marketing programs specifically designed to target our conditions. When you go to Wendy's and you ask for the 4x4, you're asking for a trip to the doctor. When you find yourself in a community like we have in South Jackson, where there are no restaurants that are open that feed good, wholesome food, you're in a food desert. And so you eat junk. And then when you want to do better, you can't afford to do better. Eating healthy is really expensive. You don't have the money to go to Whole Foods and buy the kinds of products designed to keep you healthy. So what do we find ourselves doing? Struggling with diabetes and heart failure, caused primarily by stress and poor diets. And so we're under attack in a different way. You see, we often talk about the murders and the number of gunshots that are occurring in our urban cities. Jackson has the dubious distinction of being the murder capital of the world. But there are all kinds of bullets being fired in our community. Lack of access to capital is a bullet that's being shot in our community, and it's hitting every aspiring entrepreneur. It's killing dreams and families and ideas and concepts. But we don't keep track of it. When you see the lack of healthy food in our community, that's a bullet that's being fired in our community. It's designed to give you poor health, create an environment where your life expectancy is lessened. When you see the lack of economic opportunity in businesses in a predominantly black community, that is a bullet that's being fired because it leads to poverty. 42% of Jackson's population lives below the poverty line. Those are bullets that are in our community that are as dangerous as it was in the days of hanging. And so we got to recognize all of these things that are occurring in our community so that we talk about them and we put it on the table. And Juneteenth gives us that opportunity to get sponsors to listen. Atmos Energy will listen this weekend. Entity will listen. C-Spire will listen. Netflix will listen. All of your car dealerships will listen this weekend, because this is the moment that we reflect upon where we came from, how we got here, and more importantly, what's going on today. So let's use Juneteenth in the right way. Saturday at the New Horizon Hill Complex, I mentioned to you that we're going to have a wellness experience. Then Saturday at 2:30, we have couples that are going to jump the broom. Well, what is jumping the broom? Where did it come from? How did it originate? What did it mean? It's an African American tradition that we initiated to confirm our commitments in marriage. Because we weren't allowed to get married in churches or the courthouse. We weren't allowed things of that nature. So black folk, in their creative ways, they created things. They took the least of everything and made the most out of it. They took the least desired products from animals, chitlins and tripe and things of that nature, and made the very most out of it. And jumping the broom is just one example. So at New Horizon, we're going to have 10 couples that are going to jump the broom. And I hope they understand when they do jump the broom exactly why they're jumping it, in hopes that we'll let the legacy of the ancestors, of all of the things that they came through, be the backdrop that will keep them together and help them to deal with all of the issues that are facing them today. It's hard out here. And Saturday, we're going to have the Bobby Rush motorcade parade for Bobby Rush. Bobby's in his 80s now. And, you know, he's a Grammy, an Emmy winner. He's recognized all over the world as one of the premier entertainers. But you need to listen to him in his music, but then you need to go back and spend some time and listen to his history. Where did he come from? How was he able to do that? Not many of you know that Bobby was a construction worker in Chicago. Well, how did he get to Chicago? Because all blacks had to leave here. You had to leave the circumstances. Bobby worked with Charles Evers in Chicago, Illinois, as a construction worker. I think Charles gave him a job. Charles Evers is the brother of Medgar Evers, who is going on now to be in glory. That was a street warrior, a fighter, an individual that did more to liberate Mississippians by simply demonstrating courage that had not been seen before by blacks in Mississippi. From being the mayor in Fayette, Mississippi, to running for the governor of the state of Mississippi at a time when your life was always threatened. Then we're going to have the Bobby Rush concert, Showtime, featuring Bobby Rush. Then all of the vendors in food, arts, music, apparel, lounge, and more will be on the grounds. Then Saturday, we're going to have the Young Life Prayer. And Lord, do we need Young Life Prayer, because our children are lost. They're lost because they have been structured in a way to be lost, because the breakdown of the family and the taking of the male out of his natural role has created an environment where our children run wild. And so everything that I know and that I stand for and I believe in was a foundation coming from my father. He was my first role model. He was the example. He was a provider. He was a disciplinarian. He was an individual that gave you hope and aspirations. And if you don't have that, I don't know how you're supposed to have self-esteem. I don't know how you're supposed to create a legacy from no legacy. And so our children need help. Well, this has been Newsbreak on this Friday. I hope everybody enjoys Juneteenth celebrations throughout this country. Stay safe, and we'll be back next week. Good evening.